This is the moment we've all been waiting for the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world. Let's get ready to
Welcome to the Junkyard Pod. Today we have a very special episode where we will be reminiscing about the 2013-14 Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the more interesting and nostalgic seasons for some of us. For others, it's maybe a season they'd like to forget. We're going to break down everything that happened that season, the key storylines, the moments that we remember, and then at the end, we have a handful of awards to hand out, which I think will be a lot of fun. Joining me to do all of this are my two co-hosts, Jackson Flickinger and Corey Walsh, and let's start right here. Jackson, what memories immediately come rushing back when you think of the 2013-14 Cavaliers?
So I think this season is a really good case study for nostalgia and what you think you remember and what you actually remember and what actually happened, because this season absolutely sucked. This was the worst season of Cavalier basketball in my entire lifetime, and it's not even close. There's no close second. This was miserable. This was an abject failure of the season, of a franchise. And, you know, we're here. Tony's here to talk about how when he was 13, this was the best thing he ever saw. So,
Stole
go.
it right out of my mouth almost. Corey, what about you? How do you remember the 2013 Cavs?
Well, to piggyback off Jackson, when I was 14, I considered this a really fun season as well. It was kind of awful to look back on it and just like kind of go through season in reviews from a lot of different outlets, with the unanimous sentiment pretty much being, I saw one that I kind of saw as kind of the culmination of the season of, like, what was that? Because I think Jackson's right. I mean, I think going into this was probably the most hopeful season I had in my tenure as a Cavaliers fan up to that point. I kind of joined the Cavs right after the LeBron saga and getting into basketball. And this was kind of like,
that was a mistake.
Yeah, well, you make mistakes. All right. And my mistake was really buying into this team early. And I should have realized that the way the season started by drafting Anthony Bennett was going to kind of be the symbol of the team's downfall.
Yeah, I'm basically right there with Corey. Listen, this is what I think makes this fun, is that this is all about perspective. For Jackson, you grew up with that first LeBron stint, and everything post-decision was just, it must have been a nightmare. For me, I was 11 when LeBron left Cleveland the first time, so I remember his first stint in Cleveland, but I was a little kid, I remember his game against Detroit, game 5, the infamous, the last 27 points, something like that. I fell asleep during that game because I was a child. But after he leaves, the first season where I really, really started paying attention to the NBA and locking in was the 2011-2012 season. So for me, this 2013-14 was actually the most successful Cavs season that I had ever witnessed. For Jackson, understandably, it was a nightmare. For me, I was like, 33 wins, let's go. Like, I remember where I was for each one of those wins. But before we dive in and give a quick refresher, setting the stage for what it was like entering that season, just want to quickly say, if you enjoy the Junkyard Pod and you want to support the channel on YouTube, all you have to do is drop a like or hit subscribe. And in case you didn't know, we do upload relatively infrequently to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That is something that we're going to start doing consistently. We have some exciting news, hopefully, on the horizon in that department. So help us out over there. Help boost those numbers. Subscribe on Apple or Spotify. You don't have to see me and Jackson and Corey struggle with our cameras every time on YouTube. You can listen to the podcast, and hopefully the audio quality will be perfect. So please help us out in both of those departments. And let's dive into this.
Please hold on. Please do support us on the podcast side of things. It is the Junkyard Pod. It is not the Junkyard YouTube show, and we do love this YouTube aspect. But we would like to get our pod numbers up a little bit. So, help us out, guys, please. Yeah. If you enjoy the work that we do, or if you just hate both of us, all of us, then, subscribe too. So we really would appreciate it.
Yeah. I will have links in the description to that in case you can't find it. But let's go ahead and set the stage for what the 2013-14 season was. If anyone doesn't really remember, this is Anthony Bennett's rookie season. It's Kyrie and Dion Waiters running the show. Tristan Thompson is an up-and-coming player. Andrew Bynum was their big free agency splash, along with Jarrett Jack. They still have Wild Thing on the roster. Mike Brown is back as head coach after 2 years in LA. And at the time, entering the season, it seemed like things were looking up. People had high hopes for this team, especially coming off the heels of the decision from a few years ago. The over-under for this Cavs team was set at 40.5. People thought that they would be in the playoff race. Now they finished at 33 wins. They ranked 23rd in net rating, and basically nothing went right for this team.
Would that have got him into the play-in? Do you have that off the top of your head?
No.
Yeah, the 8th seed was the Hawks, I think, and they had 38 wins.
Okay.
Right, but would they be the 10th seed?
Oh, yeah, they were the 10th seed anyway. Yeah.
Okay,
they were 10,
so they would have
9. Yeah.
Okay, so they would have gotten. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
without getting distracted, Dion Waiters is a guy who was built for the play-in stage, if I say so myself. So that would have been a treat.
He always showed up, and the lights were at their brightest. That was Dion's specialty.
So before we get too into it, I kind of just want to talk about why this season was so bad, and I think you have to kind of talk about it in the beginning. It's because of how much expectation there was. It was like, this is year 3 of Kyrie Irving. He took a considerable step forward in year 2. He looked like he was already going to be like a top 5 point guard in the league, and it was like, whoa, what is the ceiling for this guy? He is so good. Dion Waiters was exceptional at the end of his rookie season, and there was like this thought where like, man, is Dion Waiters like these like just exceptional scoring 2 guards that is just like an automatic basket anytime? And there was still, you could see there was room to still like round out his game. And you're like, well, if he became a better passer, if he became a better defender, you can really see like, hey, this is like a good NBA player. So we have Kyrie, we have Dion, and we got the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Now nobody knew Anthony Bennett was going to be like as much of a was going to be a bust. You know, I guess some people didn't know.
At least.
Right.
I don't think anyone, we have a whole segment on how bad Bennett was. I don't think anyone could have seen that coming.
But you throw that into, like, we have 2 cornerstones. Tristan Thompson's coming along. You're like, this is an NBA starting center. You can win with Tristan Thompson at center. So you have 3 guys in place that you're like, okay, this is our team moving forward. You throw in the number 1 overall pick. He's going to be playing the 4. And now we are a small forward away from just being like, you know, being
a bang away.
Yeah,
an Ian Clark.
Yeah.
Right. So you're so close, and it's like, all right, this is where you're going to take the next step forward. Even if it wasn't a playoff, even if you weren't a good playoff team, you should be fighting for that 8 seed, 7 seed, 6 seed. So there was real expectations around that. And then the front office, they acknowledged it by going and trying to win, getting win now pieces. Before then, they were trying to tank. They were not getting win now pieces. Now you add Andrew Bynum. It's hard to talk about Andrew Bynum now without sounding really hyperbolic. Andrew Bynum,
at the time, that was
he
big.
sucks. Andrew Bynum was like considered to be, when he was with the Lakers, one of the best centers in the entire league. Mm-hmm. He's not too far removed from his championships with Kobe. Okay, he can do that with Kobe. What is he going to do
Can he do it with Dion?
I was going to say Kyrie.
Yeah.
But, you know, like he did so much for them. Now he's going to do that for the Cavs. And there was still, like, Tristan Thompson was still kind of a power forward at that time. And we're bringing Anderson Varejao off the bench. Like, he's really good. You add Jarrett Jack. And now you have 7 or 8 guys that you're really high on, that you actually think this could legitimately work. Meanwhile, LeBron James is winning championships. He's dominating at a level that
coming up at 2 straight.
That he's dominating at a level that is higher than we saw in Cleveland. And it seems like there's nothing going to stop the Miami Heat. He's so good that you're like, man, if he was just on those old Cavs teams, if you threw that LeBron on the 2007-8 team, they're running through the finals because LeBron's just so dominant, and we just kind of squandered this. But hey, we have this new group that maybe we can challenge LeBron. What if the Cavs and Heat played in the first round? What if the Cavs won a game at home against LeBron in the playoffs? How crazy would that be? That's kind of the context around this season. So there was something at stake here because of what LeBron was doing and because of us not being able to win one when he was here. It's so different than the 2018, 19, 19, 20. It's like much different than that time because LeBron's kind of older. Even though the Lakers got Anthony Davis, you're not comparing yourself to them because it's, hey, we got our championship, the best championship ever. Who cares? We like these new guys. Let's see how this unfolds. Whereas then you're not thinking like that because you're still thinking about the letter that Dan Gilbert wrote. He's saying that like, hey, we're going to bring championships to Cleveland. And it's like, hey, let's do it. We're not going to win one this year, but we have Kyrie. Kyrie's really freaking good. It's really hard to describe how high people were on Kyrie at this time. So that's why this season absolutely sucked, and you got to set it up first because that explains the downfall.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all right there, and we are going to talk about Kyrie here in a second, but the fact that the expectations were, I'm saying they're high. People were expecting them to be like an 8 seed, but compared to where they finished, it was kind of like the opposite of the 2021 Cavs, where you kind of went in with no expectations that year, and all of a sudden, whoa, we're a playing team. This is the opposite, where you expected them to be competitive, and I mean, they started off, they won their first game, and then after that, it was like all hope went down the drain pretty quickly, I believe. Look, Bynum was a disaster right away. Bennett, after the preseason, was a disaster. Jarrett, Jack, eventually Luol Deng were disasters. Even Kyrie, who was special, again, had a little bit of a weird season. And so the Cavs, while they were attempting to take this next step forward in their rebuild, I'm going to quickly share a bit of a story from Chris Manning, former Fear the Sword editor and Locked On Cavs host, because he wrote a season preview for this squad, and you know what? He kind of nailed it. He addressed all the potential issues that this team could face, from Bynum's health to Bennett being a questionable number 1 pick, and all of the uncertainty about the supporting cast and whether or not any of this would even come together in a meaningful way. And one thing that he wrote that I thought was a good transition for us, because it stands out and I think it kind of defines this era of Cavs basketball, is he says this: even through all of this uncertainty, the Cavaliers do have one shining light, and that light is Kyrie Irving. Jackson, you named your cat after Kyrie Irving. So I want to start with you here. Was Kyrie enough to get you through this mess of a season?
No, because for me personally, all right, you couldn't win a championship with LeBron freaking James. No matter how good Kyrie is, you have to build a team around him that makes sense, or it's just not going to come together. And as good as Kyrie was, we knew that Kyrie was kind of a normal basketball, a normal, really good basketball player, and not like a once in a lifetime talent. So there was this idea of, hey, Kyrie's really good, but what does that mean if nothing else around him is good? It's like once the season ended, there kind of was the idea of, well, he's probably going to leave at some point, because why would he stay? Because this team sucks. And it just felt like that sort of, pretty early on, because it's at some point you got to start winning, and you're, just coming off of this whole LeBron thing. And it's kind of like, how there was the Donovan Mitchell angst with re-signing? It wasn't the same, because obviously when you're rookies, nobody turns down that first contract, etc. But, with the Donovan Mitchell thing, there was always a ticking time clock kind of in the back of your mind, all right, we got to do something. But with Kyrie, it was a little different, because you hadn't done anything before and there was no team around him. So it was at some point, something's just going to happen, and you just kind of felt that way. So no, he wasn't good enough in the way that for example, if Sexton or Garland were Kyrie-like players in their first 2 seasons, you would have felt a lot differently, just because the stakes weren't the same.
And that's fair. I think me and Corey probably have a more optimistic view of it. So I want to pitch this to Corey, and just what do you remember from Kyrie specifically this season, but even just that era of Cavs basketball?
I feel like it's one of those things where when you especially with me, what the first season I watched the Cavs was right after LeBron left So I was accustomed to the team having zero expectations at all times. And with my football team being the Patriots at that time, I was really just grasping for any solace whatsoever because I'm kind of used to the team doing somewhat well. So when Kyrie kind of started to turn into this player, that seemed like he was definitely obviously the alpha of the room in terms of skill level. To see him perform in his sophomore year so well, coming into that, you're like, oh my God, you can only expect him to take that next step again. And it's one of those things you kind of learn as you follow the NBA that the better your player becomes when he's in a smaller market, it's like a double-edged sword, because if the team doesn't properly kind of support that player, you're fearing the whole time, like after every loss mounts up, that he's just 1 foot out the door even further. And I think this season, to me, when I remember it, it kind of felt like this was the Cavs' best attempt of trying to cater to Kyrie Irving. I mean, their moves at the deadline were kind of them trying to support Kyrie because they felt like their moves that they made in the offseason didn't necessarily translate either. I mean, the Bynum thing, I remember, yes, and name was huge, but this was like 1 or 2 years of removed from Andrew Bynum having that weird Philly stint where it just seemed like his life was going off the rails. There were pictures of him in like bowling alleys throwing like fist fights, and he was going through like 900 different haircuts from what I remember at the time. So Bynum in name, I remember that all the previews were like, yeah, Bynum could be great, but also Bynum is far enough removed from the player that was on those championship Laker teams that it caused a lot of questions as to the Cavs are basically just taking an expensive dice roll that they need to take because they were coming off a pretty poor season. They just changed their head coach. They are making a lot of moves to try to just keep up with their rising superstar. And they felt like they took the risk with Bynum, and then they tried to stabilize it, I feel like, with Jarrett Jack, because he was just coming off of nearly being like a 6 man of the year candidate with the Warriors. And on paper, it made sense. It just didn't work out for a lot of different reasons. And I feel like it's just the culture that the Cavs had at the time. It was too unstable. If Andrew Bynum went into a more stable situation, like if Anthony Bennett went into a more stable situation, I feel like there could be different career paths for both of them. But I feel like I was excited the entire time, even though it just wasn't necessarily working out. There was a period where it felt like they hit their stride in like February, I think was their only part of the season with a winning record. They went 8-6 in that stretch. And I thought they were turning, like the roster was coming together, and then they absolutely fizzled in the last 2 months.
One thing that you guys are completely missing on Andrew Bynum, like you mentioned a brief thing in Philly, like he didn't play that whole year because of an injury. He was 26 when the Cavs signed him. So I believe that's like Jared Allen's age. The last full season he played, so he missed the one full season, but the season before that, he was second team All-NBA and an All-Star, averaging 18.7 points per game and 12 rebounds. Like, this was a legit center. There were questions about him, and I know there was some weird stuff off the court, and that popped up again, obviously, with the Cavs. But if you're just looking at it on paper, you're like, this guy is freaking good. Like, he's not, like, and he's coming into his prime. We should be getting his prime seasons right now. So, like, it was not a roll of the dice in the sense of, all right, well, this guy, he was good 4 years ago. He was on some big teams then, and he's older now. There were questions, but the last time he took an NBA court, he was amazing.
Yeah, it just felt like when the signing came up, it was like, I remember like vaguely when SportsCenter talked about it, they're like, the market for Andrew Bynum was not that great. Cleveland's offer was very wealthy compared to everyone else's. And that was solely because of the state the team was in. The Cavs definitely should have taken it. I'm not saying they shouldn't have, but it's like a move that a team that where the Cavs were going to take. Like they weren't going to pull in anyone else. They had to overpay for people that they wanted, and they weren't going to get anyone better than obviously what the ceiling of what Andrew Bynum was going to be. It just, for the Cavs, it just didn't work out. But you see the logic behind what they did.
Right. Yeah. But that kind of gets to the point of like, if this happens and this happens and this happens, you're really cooking with something. If the first round pick hits, if Kyrie takes another step, which he did, if Andrew Bynum returns to the player he was, if Dion Waiters keeps going, this is a legit team that maybe could be a 4 seed, if all those things were to really hit. So that's where it's like, there were real expectations.
Yeah, and with the Bynum thing, I think it's like in hindsight, obviously, it's like, well, now it makes sense why the market wasn't super hot for him and why the Cavs were able to swoop in. But at the time, again, like it made sense why they took that chance on him. Even at the time, it didn't feel like as big of a risk because you're like, hey, with this guy, when he's healthy and on the court, he's really, really good and he's still young. So this could work out. Clearly, it went about as bad as it could have. Bringing this back, I want to share my thoughts on Kyrie because for me, I remember Kyrie making this team just worth watching every night at the time. And Kyrie has kind of become, he's redeemed himself a little bit. He's become more of a fan favorite again over the last, all the controversies that he's been through. But at that time, he was still just the lovable rising star. He was something to be excited about. Almost all of my favorite moments from that season came from Kyrie, whether it's the All-Star Game MVP, where I believe he was the youngest All-Star Game MVP ever at that point. The crossover on Pablo Prigioni, where he just has him spinning around a screen. The game winner against Philly in double overtime, aka that's the game where everyone thought Michael Carter-Williams was next up, if everyone remembers that hype for him. And really just every night you watch the Cavs back then, Kyrie would do something spectacular. When you go back and look at old highlights, even before LeBron came back, every other possession, Kyrie is doing something that just felt like he was from another planet, whether it's his body control and his finishing at the rim, the spin he would add to the ball and all around the backboard, the way he would contort his body while dribbling through defenders. I don't think it's really a hot take to say that, at least in my lifetime, he's the greatest ball handler that I've seen and probably the greatest below the rim finisher as well. Putting that all in one package. Does anyone agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, he's
at
great.
Least in our lifetime.
Anyone who's watching this knows that he's great. But
yeah.
Kind of to go back to like that time period. So the Uncle Drew commercial, I believe that came up
before.
Yeah, but I think it came out in the summer, or it came out pretty late in the year.
Yeah.
So like this, I think this was like the first full season post that. And you have to remember that in it wasn't that long ago, but in 2013, things didn't go viral like overnight.
It was a little different.
Like there's like a build up to it almost. So or like you had to like hear about it. Like, hey man, did you like see that video of Kyrie at the dressed up like the old guy? Like there was kind of that element to how things would go viral back then. So it was just kind of like he was like viewed as being like really cool and like, oh, he's like the next guy. And the practice, what was it? He was on the U.S. select team.
USA practice.
Yeah, I think that was the year before this one too.
Kobe, Durant, James Harden.
Right.
That's one of the most ridiculous highlight plays to this day that I've ever seen.
Right. So that's where it was like, I don't know if anything, like we knew who Kyrie was. So like there wasn't anything from that season that I feel like you're learning that's different. Or like, I guess if he became like a 35 point per game scorer, that would change things. But we knew who Kyrie was. So that's why I don't think like Kyrie alone was ever going to get you through the season. But yeah, he was phenomenal.
On the Uncle Drew thing, I did have a question that I wanted to ask because I know at least in my school, and I don't know if this was a look that existed beforehand. Again, I'm young, but like I personally don't remember people, tucking their socks or their sweatpants into their socks before the Kyrie Uncle Drew commercial. But afterwards, everyone started doing that. I know at least in the Cleveland area, Corey, I don't know if it was happening out there, but like all of a sudden everyone wanted to look like Uncle Drew. And I just think, when's the last time, especially if you're talking about a Cleveland team that like, other than LeBron, they hadn't really had a superstar who was like a marketing superstar too and was in a commercial that went this viral and people want to look like him. And, there was an Uncle Drew movie, the Youngblood thing. Like it was just a cultural phenomenon that like didn't really happen for Cleveland sports outside of LeBron James.
Yeah, and I think that's why when you kind of, you hear those rumors about Kyrie not really being too thrilled about LeBron like signing up with the Cavs a year later. That may be why, because even though like the Cavs were in the spotlight a lot more, like LeBron outshined Kyrie obviously, and it seemed like at that point that Kyrie was in the perfect spot to just become like a mega star.
Yeah, it felt like kind of. I mean, we'll never know what Cleveland would have looked like with Kyrie just by himself for a longer period of time. But I feel like it was just going to probably never turn out the way we all would have hoped it would. I think that LeBron kind of saved where that franchise was going. It felt like they took their swing and they whiffed pretty bad in this season. And they were just going to be stuck with all these contracts that they didn't really want to have down the road. Like I said, like it fell halfway through the year with that Luol Deng and Spencer Hawes deadline, that this was them kind of scrambling and trying to recoup whatever they felt like momentum they lost up to that point. I remember the sole reason for that Luol Deng trade was because of the Duke ties with Kyrie, because there were rumors that Kyrie was getting very disgruntled with like how the Cavs were kind of heading in that direction. There was only 2 times in that entire season the Cavs had a win streak longer than 2 games. They won 3 games like in October, and then they won on a 5-game win streak, which is their longest in the post LeBron era, only to lose like the next 3 games to all of the teams that they were competing for the playoff spot to. And then when Tony was saying with that, when Kyrie won that MVP for the All-Star game, like I feel like that was the highest high Cavs fans have felt in a long time, only for Woj to like minutes later drop a report about how bad the Cleveland front office mishandles the Kyrie situation. And it just felt like you couldn't get steady momentum. And LeBron coming in, yeah, probably it made Kyrie upset, but I think Kyrie was going to be naturally upset anyway. I think at the end of the day, your star can shine really bright, but when it's like you're all alone and your team is just treading water at all times and taking dart throws, Kyrie was going to want to leave eventually. This was like the beginning of that movement anyway. LeBron kind of kickstarted it in Miami, but I feel like it took a few years for it to really spike. It kind of started around 2014.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a bold take that Kyrie would have left anyway, considering that's all he's done since.
Well, hindsight's 2020 as the Monday morning quarterback,
Moving along into some of the other storylines, because look, you didn't need us to tell you that Kyrie was a special player who probably was going to leave Cleveland no matter what one day. One thing that I really want to focus on, because look, we all know that Anthony Bennett didn't turn out the way that we would have hoped, but I was somehow surprised looking back at how bad he actually was. So I want to, share my thoughts real quick, because here's the thing about Anthony Bennett, right? He was a tweener in the truest sense. He was listed at 6'7", 240 pounds. He basically couldn't pass, couldn't dribble, couldn't shoot, couldn't really defend anyone, couldn't play the 3 or the 4 or the 5. He's basically Draymond Green if you just took away every single skill that makes Draymond Green special. He averaged in his rookie season 4 points per game, shot 35% from the floor, averaged more fouls than field goals per game. He finished in the 2nd percentile for points per shot attempt, the 1st percentile in effective field goal percentage, which for anyone keeping track, that is the worst possible percentile.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, you want to be in the 100th percentile, not the 1st percentile.
He shot 30% or worse from every spot on the floor besides the rim. Well, he shot 60% at the rim, which is nice. The 41st percentile, so slightly below average. This was the stat that I found, SB Nation, that shocked me the most. Maybe not shocked, but just was horrendous. So they looked at the player efficiency rating of the last 24 number 1 overall picks from 2014 to the 90s when Bennett was drafted in 2014. So of those 24, he was dead last in player efficiency rating. He was 10 points lower than Kwame Brown, who was 2nd worst. So let me say that again. Of the last 24 number 1 overall picks, he was 10 points worse than the 2nd worst. The gap between Kwame Brown and Tim Duncan was the same size as the gap between Bennett and Kwame Brown. So it was pretty bad is what I'm trying to say.
And Tim Duncan, wasn't he he made like an all-NBA team, I think, his rookie year.
He was the 2nd best of the 24. Shaq was number 1, just slightly ahead of him. And to be fair to Anthony Bennett, apparently he couldn't even see the fans in the crowd. He said his eyesight was so bad that he couldn't see the scoreboard during his rookie season. The Cavs drafted a player number 1 overall who was unable to read the plays the coach was drawing up in front of him. He had to get LASIK eye surgery. Now, I would love to say like that's a valid excuse. The rest of his career didn't turn out any different, so like I don't really know. But apparently the guy couldn't even see, and he had sleep apnea as well.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
The draft report on like the after the first month was like when the dump started happening on Anthony Bennett. Like all the reports came out, and like it started with the LASIK, and then it's like, why isn't Anthony Bennett played like major minutes? And then the team doctors come out being like, well, he's a little overweight and he has sleep apnea, so that's not really helping either. His best game was by far that Orlando preseason game, the biggest false hope I think a rookie has ever shown in preseason, where you're like, it was 14 straight points in like the fourth quarter. You kind of thought he took the next step, and then immediately it comes out at opening day, like, oh, by the way, Anthony Bennett is overweight and he can't see, and he hasn't been able to sleep since he got off the team plane. So I don't know what the Cleveland doctors were doing. It wasn't like Bennett was ever in the consideration for top 3, 5. They said he was going to be like anywhere from 5 to 10. And it wasn't like this was even before the draft, like after the draft was over, this was regarded as kind of like a pretty weird draft. Nerlens Noel was supposed to be like the consensus number 1. He slid all the way, I think, to 8 in this draft. And then they were like, all right, well, if you don't go with Noel, you'll probably want to go with like Oladipo. But then the Cavs, I guess, internally were like, we can't have another guard in the room.
Kobe wasn't the GM yet.
So they just I guess took the swing for positional need, and it really just bit them in the ass apparently.
One of the things that's really weird about this era is that it's not like 3-point shooting wasn't valued like it is now, but it also wasn't 2001 either, where nobody knew what a 3-point shot was. Like, we just got done watching the 7-game series between like the Spurs and Heat, where like Danny Green is swinging games. The Heat are just kind of playing, they're playing money ball out there with some of their lineups that they're throwing out there. So it's not, even in like 2009, that Magic team was like really one of the first teams to like super embrace like the 4 out and then like one guy inside offenses. So it wasn't like, like people point to like the Warriors as like the team that changed everything, but it wasn't like we were in like the dark ages where nobody knew what 3-point shooting was. So it's just kind of weird that the Cavs drafted somebody as like a 3-4 who couldn't shoot or dribble or do anything like that.
Or see
right
beat in front of him.
Yeah, well, like the seeing is fine. I mean, they should have known that, whatever.
Over there.
But like,
you can find out the physical.
But just kind of like what they thought the best version of Anthony Bennett was like, were people still clinging to like, Charles Barkley wasn't that tall? Like, is that what people were clinging to still? Or like,
well, he couldn't rebound the ball either.
Right.
That also wasn't a skill.
He wasn't, and he wasn't like, because there were like Amari Stoudemire was a power forward at that time.
Yeah.
Like, somebody who's like super athletic, he was really impactful. Like nobody squinted and said this is like Amari Stoudemire 2.0. Yeah, Bennett was squinting, but that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like trying to piece together what the thought process was at the time. Yeah. What I kind of thought was that like the Cavs wanted a power, like they just wanted a fit, and like, oh, he could play off of the guys that they have there, and if LeBron came back, he could fit like conceptually with LeBron in the sense that he doesn't play the same position. But like, I just don't know what the thought process was, and that's what I want to know.
Yeah, I originally was going to, like, when I was thinking of our segments for this, is I tried to think, like, could he have been successful in a different era, maybe playing 10, 20 years ago, but I kind of think eyesight is something you need regardless of where you're playing. And again, not to just pile on him, but he just didn't have NBA level skills. He wasn't a freak athlete, couldn't shoot the ball, wasn't, taking you off the dribble, wasn't even finishing at the rim at an elite rate. Like, there really wasn't much there. And so again, to echo what Jackson said, I don't know what the thought process was that, like, if you want to take a chance on him at 10, go for it. But at number 1, I know it was a weak draft, but
it'd be like taking your guy Darion Holmes or The guy from yeah.
I would have taken him number one.
I know.
So let's move on here, because this is the other, I would say, maybe key storyline from that era. Corey, what do you remember about the Waiter Wars? The wars between Kyrie and Dion?
It was like the weirdest PR nightmare I feel like the Cavs had, because there would be a story, at least I feel like every month, where you would get a brand new PR piece being whether the Kyrie and Dion have settled their differences and they really are just getting along great, to Kyrie may have been punched in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really like a fun time. And then obviously, from what I remember of the Cavs internet back then, it was like you had your hives. It was very similar to the Sexton and Darius hives, except pretty more aggressive, I would probably argue, because the Dion hive was very committed to the bit, while the Kyrie people kind of had to sit back and be like, you could just look at the numbers. The Dion fans are like, you're just not seeing the potential because that ball hog is just holding it the entire time. If you give Dion the room to cook, we would be winning so many more games. And then, Pat Riley saw that vision. He agreed with what the Cavs fans were saying, and Dion had one good game elsewhere. But I remember that I always kind of felt like it was going to be awkward. I felt like Jarrett Jack was meant to be that bridge. In reality, the bridge was crumbling before they even acquired it. So that their little stopgap solution didn't help. But I remember it, looking back on it, you always remember it more fondly, but in the time, it was the most aggravating thing ever, because it felt like there was just no road to cohesion between the two of them. It just felt like your turn, my turn, never seamless.
Yeah, I mean, Waiters was kind of, not really good, besides that little run at the end of his rookie season that kind of fooled, the idiots of the world. And that's where I think, like, not you, because you were 12. I think the issue, I think the issue is kind of going back to the original thing. My original point was that we knew who Kyrie was. Now we have to build a team around Kyrie, because we couldn't build a team around LeBron. We have to do it differently this time. And it was, Dion Waiters is the pick after Kyrie. He's the guy who's supposed to, elevate Kyrie, and they're supposed to really, take this team to the next level. And you didn't see that on the court, which is fine, because, it's not fine, as we said, but that's kind of understandable, I guess. But then the infighting and stuff was just too much.
The funny thing about it is that Kyrie was clearly the better player, but Dion had Dion confidence, so it made things a little murky. And, at the end of that season, I was looking at it. So Kyrie gets hurt. Dion is put into the starting lineup, and he averages 21 points per game. The Cavs at one point during that stretch win 5 out of 6, including a game where Dion buries the game winner in Detroit. And all of a sudden, Dion is wondering when he's going to get the LeBron billboard across the queue. Because, and just to talk about that game winner, I was actually at that game. I don't know why we went to a game in Detroit between the Cavs and the Pistons in March of whatever, 2014, but I was there. I was one of only maybe 100 fans total in the arena, but that was a great game. And another thing that I remember from that game is that Delly had a great game as well, who we haven't even mentioned him. This was his rookie season. We'll get to him a little near the end, but really the Dion Waiters and the Kyrie wars only really existed because Dion had so much confidence in himself that they kept clashing. And even this season, not only did Kyrie win the All-Star Game MVP, but a couple days before that, Dion has the game in the Rising Stars where it's him versus Tim Hardaway. Genuinely one of the coolest back and forths I've ever seen. But one of the things that made me laugh watching that back, Dion is in New Orleans shouting at the crowd that this is his city. Dion is from Philadelphia. So he's just claiming New Orleans after a Rising Stars game where he didn't even win the MVP of that game, by the way. Do any of you know who won MVP of that game?
Brandon Knight.
Former Cavalier legend, I'll tell you this much.
Drummond?
Andre Drummond had 30 points and 25 rebounds. I don't know how many of those rebounds were off of his own shots, but
probably a decent amount of them.
How much point Drummond did they run?
So Dion was just special. Jackson, I have a question for you. I was thinking about this. Could Dion Waiters have made the shot in Game 7 against the Golden State Warriors if he was in there instead of Kyrie?
Did he make a 3-pointer in his career? Has he done that yet?
He did in Miami, and then he did the Dwayne Wade celebration where he jumps on.
Right, he did.
Well,
he would have taken it. I will say that LeBron wouldn't have allowed him to take it.
That was my conclusion. He would have taken the shot. I don't know if he would have made it, but he definitely would have taken it.
The best thing about Dion Waiters was that vine of him clapping for the ball when LeBron had it. That was good stuff. But that's not this season. LeBron's not in Cleveland yet. But that's
Was Dion in the letter?
Yes, Dion was in the letter. The only one who wasn't in the letter was Wiggins.
That's right.
Yeah,
I remember there was a conspiracy about the letter. I couldn't remember if Dion was in it or not.
No, everyone was in it but Wiggins. I don't think Bennett wasn't in the letter, but
he couldn't read the letter anyway, so he wasn't that hurt about it.
Didn't matter. All right, well, now we've gotten Waiters Island segment out of the way. Truly one of the most special players ever in terms of just irrational confidence. And now we can move into our final segment here, which is we have awards to hand out. We have 6 different awards, some fun categories. We've got nominees and everything. So let's start off with the first one. I think this one's somewhat self-explanatory. The Jetty Osman Award for Fan Favorite. So the fan favorite from that season. Now the nominees are Kyrie, Matthew Dellavedova, and Anderson Varejao. I'm going to pick Delly as my fan favorite vote. Where do you guys stand?
No, because Delly, like the good memories you have of Delly,
it's too early for Delly to be the fan favorite.
Yeah, because Delly was a fan favorite when because he kept getting a ton of minutes for David Blatt because Blatt kept doing that thing in the fourth quarter where he wouldn't play his good players and would only play defensive guys. So Kevin Love didn't play in the fourth quarter. Delly would play way too many fourth quarter minutes, and then he would hit a couple threes when nobody was covering him. So I think that's where he became a fan favorite. Whereas here, I don't remember Delly as a fan favorite. I remember him more as just a guy, and he had those. There was the stories about him getting in being too physical with Kyrie in practice, and it was what is this idiot doing? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't the Delly of the memes that happened the next year and the year after. It was more so what is this guy doing?
Yeah. Well, I was in high school at the time, so I do remember the lunch table. Did you guys see Delly last night? This Delly guy, who's this? So I do remember that. I'll let Corey decide between. Wait, so who are you voting for? Kyrie?
I would vote. This team sucked. There was nothing good about this team.
Jackson did not fill out a ballot.
Kyrie.
So Corey, you get.
I would say Kyrie. I would say Kyrie
because he's
the only person who was worth caring about.
That's
nobody else was worth caring about.
Here,
Tristan Thompson, maybe Tristan Thompson, because
that's
because Tristan, you felt that he was there every night. He played every night. He played hard, and you're this is an NBA player. He's not you don't have the problems that you have with Dion Waiters, and you don't have the problems that you have with Anthony Bennett. He's not blowing anybody away. Could they have drafted 15 better guys with that pick? Of course, but Tristan Thompson's an NBA player, so I would say that he would be my vote for this award.
Okay.
But based on your nominations, I'd go Kyrie.
Based on the nominations, I would also go with Kyrie, but I was also going to be the one to plug Tristan Thompson, seeing as he was the only player to suit up again for all 82 games of this Cavalier roster. Also, if we're going in the spirit of the award and it's more meant for the role players, I feel even though Kyrie, had the most defined role on the team, everyone else was constantly in flux just for reasons of poor performance or injury. This team was low-key pretty injured as well. Tristan Thompson, I feel better fits the spirit of the award. And I would say this was this was kind of a sneak peek of the Tristan Thompson we would see more in years to come, because he just was consistently flirting with double doubles every night on this team. And we didn't know, but he would soon be our center for years to come. We thought he was a very limited power forward at the time, but he kind of stepped into his role, and this was kind of just us getting a sneak peek of it.
not a fan favorite, but like I liked CJ Miles some
So did
at
I.
that
Love
time.
CJ Miles.
So
2K,
like
2K legend.
yeah, he was a 2K legend. That's probably where I get most of my fond memories from him. But he's somebody who I would also nominate where like you're like, oh, maybe there's something here.
That was Alonzo
I think-
G for me, who was a
Yeah.
way better shooter in 2K than he was in real life for some reason,
Well,
even though he was like
and
a
he could,
sub
like-
30% 3-point shooter.
And
his
he could
rating
dunk
was
on
A-.
everybody in the
Yes.
game.
He was so good.
I think we'll give it to Tristan Thompson. My nominees are just suggestions, so feel free to add your own as we go through this. I think Tristan Thompson wins the award.
You know, I don't know
This
if you
is
know
an
how
official
nominees
process.
work.
Just scrap the award.
That's literally what nominees are. So
You can get rid of the
if you
award,
want to give
dude. Just come up with your own.
Quick question: do you guys know who led the team in on-off this season?
Tyler Zeller.
Probably. I don't know.
Matthew Dellavedova was in the 99th percentile for on-off.
Yeah,
he was
but
like
he
a plus 13, and he played a decent amount of minutes, a surprising amount. I didn't pull exactly how many, but it was a couple hundred.
17. Okay, so he was playing like 17 minutes a game. He was probably just
Plus
playing a bunch of
13.
garbage time. He's probably playing a bunch of
Probably,
garbage time, and he's such a tryhard that like
yeah, exactly.
you know,
They're down 30, and he's playing like it's game 7. So
right.
you gotta love Delly.
And he didn't play game 7. People forget.
True. Moving into our next award here, this is the Kelly Olynyk Award for biggest what if. Now I think everyone knows what I'm referring to when I say Kelly Olynyk. But so for this specific season, I thought of 2 nominees. If anyone else has another idea, feel free to chime in.
Suggestion.
My 2 nominees are 1, what if Anthony Bennett was actually just good at basketball? What does that mean for the Cavs? And 2, this is something that every team is kicking themselves for. What if they drafted Giannis Antetokounmpo, who went 15th in that draft? Now, personally, I think
LeBron
that's
would
silly
still be
because
here.
You think so?
Well,
It'd
yeah.
be interesting to see how
He would have
Giannis
won
would
19
develop
championships.
as LeBron. I guess maybe. So it sounds like that's the biggest what if you're going with.
Yeah,
if they drafted Giannis.
It's too big of a what if because
it's
not,
unfair.
Yeah.
It's there's 14 teams passed on them. Corey, where do you stand?
I feel like the what if I thought of was what if the Anthony Bennett swing actually hit for this team? And I think it would have stabilized a lot of what this team was searching for. I mean, they obviously felt like their center position wasn't addressed. They were struggling with having Varejao be injury prone.
You mean Bynum?
Bynum. Yep. My bad. Sorry, guys.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yep. Bynum swing really hit. That team would have hit probably a 6 seed that they were projected to. I think that was a lot of the reasoning behind if Kyrie was playing at the level he was, along with because at that time the big men was so important to this era of basketball. And if Bynum was at all near that tier, it was just because it went so poorly and they did not have the proper depth, I feel like, to recover from that. They thought Hawes would kind of salvage whatever momentum they could, and it whiffed very bad for them.
So my what if is, what if the Cavs were actually good this year? What does LeBron do in 2014? Like, say the Cavs were like a 5th seed. It's funny, like Corey mentioned that Woj article where he dropped like a bomb on the Cavs, just talking about how terrible everything was with the Cavs. But I think this little portion here, I'm just going to read real quick. It's from Woj. He said, within months of LeBron James leaving for the Miami Heat as a free agent, there was belief fostered within James's inner circle of Cleveland-based agents and marketers that the planet's best player could be recruited back in the summer of 2014. Through mismanagement and personal miscalculations, the Cavaliers have made it increasingly improbable that James foresees his storybook ending in Cleveland. Obviously, that's wrong, but I kind of wonder with how sort of the framing was at the time of like LeBron jumping to like a ready-made situation with the Heat and how that was panned. If the Cavs really were like a ready-made situation where it's like, you know, Bynum's really good, Anthony Bennett's looking like a number 1 overall pick, Waiters is taking a next step, Kyrie is doing Kyrie things, like, would he have come back if he's kind of like not the savior? And I don't think that it's because LeBron can't accept him not being the center of attention or like the reason for winning. But I do think there would have been way more media backlash if, well, there was no media backlash for him coming to Cleveland. But I think there would have been there could have been backlash if the Cavs were like a 4 seed, or if they were like a 45-46 win team that was really like everything was really clicking. So I kind of that is my what if. Like, how does Cavs basketball and Cavs history change if that's a good team? Like, does LeBron not come back? If LeBron does come back, obviously they don't have the number 1 overall pick, so they're not trading for Kevin Love. So what does everything look like? So like that's kind of in the opposite direction of what if things actually worked out. But I think there's like, if this season worked out, I think that we don't get 2016. Like, and I don't even know if we get LeBron.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was going to say here when it comes to the what if moments for basically any Cavs team before 2016. Like, I don't care. I don't want any butterfly effects, whatever it might be. Like, but what if the Cavs didn't get Jarrett Jack and somehow that leads to LeBron not coming back and 2016 doesn't happen? Like, I don't care. Just, I'm glad to have everything play out the same exact way it did, because it led to the greatest moment in franchise history.
NBA history, some are saying.
And yeah, many people are saying.
But if Dion took that shot, how much better would it be?
Yeah. What if they gave the keys to Dion, in February?
What if LeBron said, "You take the keys"?
Moving to our next award, the Shaquille O'Neal Award for most washed up player on the roster. I'm sure everyone has seen the meme, the TikTok edit of Shaq in a Celtics uniform, Cavs legend, of course. So really, I think this is going to be unanimous. It's kind of funny calling him washed up because he was still relatively young, but the 2 nominees, I think it's going to be unanimous. But Andrew Bynum as number 1. And then I added Jarrett Jack in there just because he didn't have a great year. You could throw Luol Deng in there if you want. I'm voting for Andrew Bynum personally, even though it's funny to call someone washed up at 26, spoken by someone who's turning 26 in about a month. So hopefully that I don't follow the same Andrew Bynum path. But Corey, who's your vote?
I think mine was honestly Luol Deng, because I feel like it happened within the same season. He went from Chicago, where it just felt like it was a contract thing for him. He felt like he wasn't get the money that the team was that he thought he was going to get from Chicago. So then they trade him to Cleveland because Cleveland wanted him with Kyrie. But then it was obviously like a system. I think the system just of what Mike Brown was running wasn't working for him anymore. Not that he really recovered from his stint in Cleveland, but he was playing around the same level as he was playing in years prior. You kind of were like, all right, the Cavs finally addressed their small forward, maybe not for the long term, but at least for the next few years, we have a stabilizer in some way. And his defensive play completely fell off. His 3-point shot got infinitely worse in Cleveland, whether that's because of the attention he has by being one of the better players on the floor offensively versus in Chicago, where he was always kind of like the 3rd or 4th option at all times. But I felt like his drop off being in the same season really caught me by surprise. With Bynum, it was like, all right, so it just didn't pan out.
Someone I want to nominate here is Anderson Varejao. This was kind of, so like Andy's seasons post LeBron were kind of uneven. He played good in the previous 2 seasons, but he only played 25 games each in both. He was starting to have some injury issues. This was the most healthy season that he would have for the rest of his career. And he just kind of wasn't really that same guy, or you could see signs of him not being that same guy anymore. So he only had 8.4 points per game. For context, he had 14 in the shortened season that he played the season before. So I think you kind of saw that the writing was on the wall that like Andy's best days are behind him, and he's probably not going to be the same guy he was. So that's who I would kind of nominate. But then he also played for the Cavs in 2021. So
True. Be a multiple time winner of the award. So we have a 3-way split here. That means let us know in the comments who you think was the most washed up, who wins the Shaquille O'Neal Award for the 2013-14 Cavs. Our next award, the Naming Random Athletes with Your Friends Award. We have some nominees, and in the true spirit of this award, feel free to add other names as well. I nominated CJ Miles, Alonzo G, and Tyler Zeller. Personally, I'm an Alonzo G fan, so I'm going to place my vote on him. Jackson, Corey, where do you stand?
I mean, he's fine. I'm going with Sergey
I knew
Karasov.
someone was going to hit him.
Karasov?
Karasov. Yeah, sorry, I messed that up.
How dare you forget his name?
But yeah, so that's who I'm going with. Like, people were in on him, so
Dylan Windler before Dylan Windler. I don't know.
I mean, but
that's what they were calling him.
That's what everyone. That's what everyone said.
Did you see Dylan? Do you see Dylan Windler's playing for Luke Travers' old team that's pretty good. They've just swapped places. If only Luke Travers could shoot a 3, that'd be good.
Well, if only Dylan could shoot a 3.
Like if they were, well, he just needs to attempt a 3. So when he takes them, they go.
He needs a little Dion Waiters confidence. Some would say.
He's such a good rebounder. People forget. Anyways.
G League record, most rebounds in a G League game, Dylan Windler.
I still think if you play him at the 4, you could make it work. I really think
I've been saying this for years.
I'm not even...
Thank God.
Like, I'm not even a Windler guy. Like, I never believed in Windler, but then when I saw him play the 4, I was like, well, he doesn't need to have the quick release. He doesn't need to move off ball.
I agree.
Anyways, that's
Galaxy brain thinking over there.
Moving along here. So we got Sergey for Jackson. Corey, who do you vote?
I'm part of the G Hive, so I'm always going to vote for Alonzo G. I will say this is probably outlandish, but this was the most fun Cavs team I've ever played with in 2K. For some reason, they were the best 3-point shooting team I felt like in the game. If you just spread them 4 out and then put Bynum, who they still gave like an 84 rating to, you would.
Yeah, because he was an all NBA player. It was the low rating. No, because if you could just do the pick and roll, Kyrie was like unbelievably fast in that game. They had like a 99 overall speed, and like Andrew Bynum just sending these like incredible screens.
Brick wall.
You know, it was really easy, and like people who didn't. Like, who weren't Cavs fans would get really frustrated because it's like, I'm playing with the Heat. Why are you beating me? So, anyways, it was good stuff.
You like Sergey Karasov, 60 overall, A+ 3-point rating? Doesn't matter. Quick note on Sergey Karasov. If you want something really hilarious to look at the transaction record for the Cavs. They brought Karasov to and from the charge. I counted 32 times in that season. They promoted and demoted him so many times in that one.
Well, for some reason, you have to do that every time they practice with the team. So, like, even if you look at like Donovan Mitchell, like he practiced with the charge sometime. And so, like, it says like Donovan Mitchell demoted to charge. Donovan Mitchell brought up from charge. So, like, I don't know why they do that, but yeah, if you're actually going back and forth and you're not a two-way player, because spoiler, they weren't two-way players back then. It could get messy.
Our next award here, the Mailbag Award for which role player you'd like on today's team. Now, it's named the Mailbag Award because, look, I respect it, but anytime you do a mailbag episode, it's the number one question that gets asked, which former role player would you want? Well, we're picking just from the 2013-14 Cavs, which role player would you like on today's team? The nominees I picked were Spencer Hawes, CJ Miles, and Luol Deng. Maybe you could argue that Luol Deng's not technically a role player, but I'm going to vote Spencer Hawes because I've been pounding this drum for a while that if he played in today's NBA, he would be a lot different because he was a floor-spacing big man, and Lord knows the Cavs need a big, and they could use a big that can also shoot 3. So I'm taking Spencer Hawes. Jackson, who would you pick?
I'm going with CJ Miles because they actually need somebody who plays his position.
A wing,
somebody who's conceivably a wing, they could use that. So
I agree.
I think it's pretty easy.
I think I'm going to go with Anthony Bennett with LASIK. I think if you gave this
with the improvements to LASIK surgery, like he might actually be able to see from the 3-point range.
He could see at least the first row. That's what I'm thinking. Now, I honestly, even though it's a year too late, Jarrett Jack would have been probably a nice pull for this Cavs team, as we're constantly saying, God, I wish we had a true backup point guard on this roster. And Jarrett Jack, when he was hitting, that was him. And that is something I wish they actually had in 2013.
Well, I don't I don't know if you are reading fearthesword.com, but Tony is out here saying that Ty Jerome is like the best player ever. So
No, I did read that, and I
said,
thought
don't
it was
forget
the
about
Onion.
Ty Jerome.
I didn't know Tony
said
wrote for
people
the Onion
forget
recently.
Ty
Don't
Jerome.
forget that he exists, and he's 6'5", and he takes care of the ball. And sure, a sprained ankle kept him out of all 2 games last year, but who's to say that he hasn't fully recovered? We'll find out.
Admittedly, it's a low bar that he has to clear when it's Craig Porter Jr.
Oh,
Moving on.
Here we go. That's we got a wrap here. Thankfully, we only have one award left, and listen, it's the Crown Award for MVP. If we continue to do this series, it's probably going to be Kyrie or LeBron most years. But the nominees, I actually have two. I have a surprise one here.
Why?
We have Kyrie Irving and whoever was tracking Dan Gilbert's flights during that following summer.
No, the MVP is Zydrunas Ilgauskas for getting his jersey retired that year. He's the MVP.
Okay, sure, yeah.
So
I was gonna give MVP to the guy who ran onto the court and begged LeBron to come home, but that was the year before, so he was ahead of.
That was the year before. Yeah.
Yeah, I double checked.
I don't know that guy. No.
All right. That's going to do it for this episode of the Junkyard Pod. If you enjoyed today's retro episode, let us know in the comments what season you want to see us recap. Let us know who you would have voted for with each award, and feel free to drop some of your favorite or least favorite moments from this season. As I said at the top, please consider hitting subscribe both on YouTube and on Spotify or Apple. We really would appreciate some help boosting up the numbers over there. So go ahead and listen to the Junkyard Pod. You don't have to, look at us rambling. You can listen to it now.
Why would you do that?
Why would you ever do that? And as always, with all that being said, go Cavs.
I agree. Go Cavs. Brian, what was the worst moment of this season?